Let's see here. Okay. Let's see here. Your viewers. Okay. 6 people watching, 7. Okay. So it's beginning to start. We're a few minutes early. I'm going to pull a couple screens on my dashboard here. Okay. Okay. People are coming in. Cade, you're there. What's up? It's a good thing you shared this last night. You better get your notebook out. I'll be quizzing you afterwards. It's a couple minutes before 2:30. It's 2:28, and my name is Bill Mitchell. I'm going to give the group a few more minutes to kind of start climbing. We're about 30 viewers now, so I'm going to give it a few minutes. I will, as we're preparing before I do the intros, give you kind of a tell them what you're going to tell them kind of speech. Today, I wanted to mix it up a little bit with from technique to actual scholarships and how to get how to brand yourself and market yourself accordingly from 8th grade through 12th grade. So as the members, Natalie Webb, what's going on? Cody Hummer, there he is. So I see some of the past wrestlers I've worked with, coaches and parents as well, so the number keeps increasing a little bit. But so I'm going to get this thing going in about a minute, but the most important thing, I would suggest getting out a notebook. I will go ahead and copy a little PowerPoint. It's got a lot of words on it. Normally a pitch deck's got a smaller amount of words, but it's got some definitions of where the money, scholarship opportunities, and all of that stuff are taking place, and the things that you should be looking at as a coach, a student athlete, or so on and so forth. Hello, Natalie. It's good to see you. My Las Vegas crew. We got California crew popping in too. Nice. And obviously our Missouri boys. So, well, we got about another minute. I would recommend, again, before we get going, I will connect this PowerPoint after the presentation, so you have some key buzzwords. If you're a parent, you'll want to know some definitions behind what I'm talking about today. And I think the most important is how do we really begin branding and creating brand awareness for an athlete early on. So it is 2:30, so I'm going to get this thing going. I got a pretty tight schedule. I'm in my office. So I want to thank Coach Baker. Lewis Baker asked me, he reached out to me before this thing really got started, I think. I don't know. Was it that he gave me a whole bunch of dates open, and by 24 hours, the dates had been filled. So I want to thank him and what he is doing in the movement of keeping awareness for all of our athletes, and most important in this time of uncertainty. So real quick, just kind of go through this. My name is Bill Mitchell. I am the president and co-founder of 2 college placement companies, one Chiron Consulting, which you might have seen the links to those in the Facebook page, and I work strategically with wrestlers and getting them to the university level, and I've been doing that for about 10 years, a little over 10 years. And then my current position is the president, co-founder with my twin brother, which many of you probably know. I see a lot of fellow coaches that are interested in what's going on with what we're doing. We are a talent acquisition student engagement platform for colleges. So we're in sense a LinkedIn between LinkedIn and Facebook for high school students to be recruited onto college. So that's kind of my background from a professional perspective and what I'm currently doing. I have spent the last 20 years, a little 20 plus years in high school and collegiate wrestling. At the high school level, I've coached at a number of Final Four finish teams, 3 state championship teams, and then obviously Lindenwood University won a national title while I was there. So I've had some coaching. You guys kind of saw that in the bio of the post that I did for Lewis pre this last night. But it's not really about me. It's about what we can do for you to help create an awareness for yourself, your athletes, and more importantly, the future for our kids across the sport of wrestling. So I'll start briefly with really the important thing here is maybe sharing this and creating brand awareness for this Facebook group that's on here. There is currently 5,000 members and climbing, and I hope Lewis Baker continues this Facebook even after this page, after we get through this virus. Moving forward, though, kind of want to give you guys some background into what really takes place at the collegiate levels. I want to give you guys some different stance on what it takes for a student to actually get into college. We're going to talk about the NCAA and the differences between the NCAA and the NAIA, and then and as well the JUCO levels, which there's not as many parameters there. But more importantly, where is the actual tangible money that a student can acquire while attending school? In so many cases, students throughout their high school career, as early as middle school, their coaches are talking about winning and winning and winning. And I get that. I've been blessed to have some amazing athletes, both at the high school, collegiate, Olympic levels that I've worked with, that have been highly successful in their own right in wrestling. But if you take a specific athlete like a Ryan Mango, for instance, he went to Stanford, right? It's the idea of how do we get into college and how do we find that financial money that most people don't know is existing. So I'm going to kind of cruise through the differences between the different divisions and what are the requirements to actually getting into those institutions. I will say, Scotty Moore, what's up, buddy? I will say that it's important for the students here, the students that are listening in on what we're discussing today, as a college recruiter, as a college placement coordinator, as a past high school coach, national teams coach, college coach, the value of your academics is priceless. And I'm going to give you some scenarios of why it's priceless moving forward through institutional scholarships that are already existing, how to find those institutional scholarships, and how to best market yourself for you to have a successful, not only academic career, but not coming out of school or the university with some student loan debt. So we'll talk about the parameters of the colleges first. I'm a big NAIA supporter, always have been since the early days of Lindenwood. I attended Lindenwood University back in the 90s. I believe the NAIA gives great scholarship opportunities, character-based scholarships, and institutional scholarships that allow students to best utilize not only their athletic ability, but also their character preferences. What's up, Sumner? Not only their preferences for their academics, but their athletics and also their character, so their clubs and their activities. So I'm going to start with them because they're the easiest to explain, and I hope that this sums it up. So those of you, Cade Willis and those guys that are on here from our team, get out your notes. The NAIA has 3 things that make a student eligible for scholarship into that institution. You've got to meet 2 of the 3 parameters. You got to be in the top 0.5% of your class. You have to have an 18 or higher on your ACT, and you've got to have a 2.5 GPA to be awarded those scholarship opportunities. And those scholarship opportunities are much like the NCAA Division III levels in that they're grant scholarships. And this scholarship is not awarded to you for any specific thing, such as a sport. It's awarded to you on about 3 different, a number of things, but mainly academics, character, and athletics or clubs or some type of student life activity. Each admissions office is a little bit different, and each university has a different institutional scholarship model that kind of embodies who they are as an institution. So the NAIA level, I would highly recommend that you reach out if you're in the state of Missouri. Mock Holtz over at Missouri Valley, Brian Jackson at Missouri Baptist, Terrell Wilburn over at Central Methodist. From the NAIA perspective, each of those individual universities have a lot of benefits and upside to their academic futures. So the NAIA, just so we know, so we can kind of close this up, have really 3 basic parameters, and making sure that you understand that you need to meet 2 of those 3 parameters if you plan on being accepted into and being awarded a scholarship at the NAIA level. You can also go to NAIA.org and you can check out what their compliance really actually looks like now. The NCAA is its own nature of the beast, and as I work with admissions offices and VPs across the country, in regards to the NCAA and the compliance matters, they change, and they change often. In many cases now, institutions are relieving the idea that you have to have a standardized test score of a certain level. So the NEI or the NCAA has a number of parameters that they're weakening or loosening up a little bit in regards to being able to fill these institutions with the number of students that need to be met. We call that the average bring, or the head count, or the average cost of a student, or the acquisition of a student to that institution. So each of the three divisions, both the NEI Division I, Division II, and Division III, I highly recommend that parents, kids, coaches, counselors, all check out what those NEI or the NCAA compliances actually are from a year-to-year perspective. By stepping back and not looking at those parameters, you could get lost in the shuffle. And I'll use an example, not to call out, but Eliezer DeLuca, who was a Rutgers wrestler, graduated a little over a year ago as their starter, was short a half a credit in math. He didn't go to junior college because he didn't have a good GPA. He went to the junior college out of high school because he was half a credit short in the math. Kevin Jackson at Iowa State just couldn't get him into that institution. That is not necessarily always the issue for the student, but the counselors as well kind of guide students through that. So as the NCAA changes their parameters, I highly recommend that you work with your compliance coordinator or counselor at your local high schools, but more importantly, kind of take ownership for yourself as an individual that plans on going to the NCAA Division I, Division II, and Division III. Now that being said, I'm going to kind of cruise through how does money actually work at each of these divisions. So here's the notes. The first step is every parent is going to have to be required to fill out a FAFSA. I'm going to give you some parameters of the federal money that you can capture, the institutional money that you can capture, and what the NCAA does with their scholarships at the Division I and Division II is really lies within the head coach at those Division I or Division II schools. So we're going to first block this up. We're going to stop and we're going to start with the federal funding mechanism. The federal money is based on one parameter. It's called the FAFSA. This free application for federal student aid form needs to be completed as early as your junior year. I mean, if I'm a parent, it would be important to me that I complete this early estimator as early maybe as their freshman year. You can go to FAFSA.org and complete the early estimator to have an idea of what that EFC number, so those of you that are taking notes, your estimated family contribution, that's your EFC number. That early estimated family contribution is the targeted number that then delivers to the admissions office how much money you will be awarded. For example, in the FAFSA, once completed, if my EFC number is 0, meaning that I can't afford to go to school, anything, I have a $0 amount for my estimated family contributions, I would be then awarded $6,195 as of the 2019 school year from the FAFSA, from the federal regulations. Now that number may change as we roll into the 2020-2021 school year, but for the most part it's around $6,000, and it's been like that for a couple decades. So completing the FAFSA, and I'll say it again, the free application for federal student aid, and I will put a link to this Google slideshow into this message at the end of the presentation so you can refer back to it. That early estimator or FAFSA for you parents out there should focus on trying to get that completed as early as your freshman or sophomore year. I will take a step back on this moment. College coaches are looking at their student athletes as early as 8th grade. So they're already tracking them and adding them to the board. So it's important that parents also understand where they, as a parent, would like to send their student or son or daughter, or where their son or daughter would like to attend. That EFC number will change from year to year. So make sure you get that completed. That FAFSA number not only gives you your Pell Grant, but it also delivers two things. It delivers what does my unsubsidized and my subsidized loans look like. Packaging both of these loans together will come up to about $5,500. Each year it kind of fluctuates, but it's about $5,500. That is a student loan that the student can take and is federally backed by by the federal government. The differences between the subsidized and the unsubsidized loans are the unsubsidized loans, the government's not paying the interest. But the subsidized loan, the government is actually paying the interest while you're attending college. You can then take that unsubsidized loan and you can defer and roll the interest back into the note. I'm going to skim through this and I'm going to come back to that because that's kind of heavy for a high school kid to understand, but it's something that becomes relative to you the day you step into college your freshman year. The next big bucket, I think, is the most important for all students, parents, and coaches. And these are the things that, as the Olympic director for the state of California, as the future Olympic director, as the head national teams coach, I traveled from Sacramento to San Diego doing, in 2015, I did 32 weekend camps. So when you take the amount of students that I have seen and the coaches that I've worked with in just that 1 year alone, it was really alarming to me, and this is one of the reasons Scholar Path exists today. It was really alarming to me to realize or to notice how many coaches and parents, teachers and counselors truly didn't understand the institutional model. So the institutional scholarship model is based on merit. So I'm going to give an example. I'm a consultant for Webster University here in St. Louis, and the international or the domestic campuses, I'm going to use an easy one. If you have a 2.5 GPA and a 19 ACT, you're going to qualify for some dollar amounts. You're going to qualify, I believe it's like $12,000 or $10,000 in academic aid. That's called institutional scholarships. The idea is the federal government has then built in these institutional models so the schools or institutions, as they grow in their profitability, as they have grown in student numbers in the last couple decades, that they also gave some awardance to the amount of students that are attending. We call it the average brain. So the students themselves can acquire your son and daughter, you as an athlete. You drive the determination of you getting scholarship. At the end of this, I'm going to kind of package this all up and show you how you can get into school at a relatively affordable cost. But you have to play your part. Your academics, your GPA, your end-of-course exams, your ACT and SAT, all would play a role in this institutional scholarship. I'm not going to go through it completely because we only have an hour block on this, but I will tell you that I would spend a little bit of time in going through the little slide deck that I put into this video, below this video after this presentation. This institutional grant scholarship models are public and out there on every website. In many cases, you can use the NCES.org website, and you can look under the data engine, and you can pull up the links to the institutions. You can also Google the school and type in net price calculator. So the net price calculator is the calculator that each institutional school or each college will use to determine what that institutional scholarship or institutional grant will look like. It's out of the net price calculator on each university website. They do have those links in the NCES database, and that's probably the easiest source to find that information. But more importantly, you can go to the university's website and pull that information. It is important and critical that you also apply for those institutions, right? And as you apply for those institutions, the institution's admissions office should reach out to you. In many cases, from a high school perspective, I'll take my university hat off. From a high school coaching perspective, I would say it's most important that you as the individual wrestler or parent complete that net price calculator, because they're not going to beat the door down to give you the money, right? The institution is going to be recruiting you, and their job is still to make money. But it's also important that we realize that we drive our own destiny. As a high school coach, it is my responsibility to then tell my kids or my athletes how to best set themselves up as they move into their sophomore and junior year. I will say that in many cases, most of our athletes, my brother and I at United States Wrestling Academy, most of our athletes are already engaging in discussions with universities as early as their freshman, sophomore year. You might have seen me, if you've been to Fargo, my twin and I are at the Fargo events, at most USA National or High School National Virginia Beach, Pat Popolizio's Journeyman events. Those events are all great ways for you to get recognition for yourself at that event. But more importantly, it's great that you can get athletic assistance from college coaches, but those athletic scholarship models are going to be based upon your performances. Well, let's just take a step back from this. If you're a student, I'm talking to you as you're my athlete. I know Kate's here and Litzinger. I see you're Jeff. You're here. It's important for me to then also deliver the message to the student that says, if you're doing horribly in school, your mind's not going to be right for that competition. Your dopamine's not going to be firing. You're not going to be excited for success. So we need to make sure that we are also focused on that success in the classroom, because it's ultimately going to, what they might say, free mental space up as you move into competition. So that is the reason I have all of my students really focus on completing their either net price calculator early stage, freshman, sophomore, junior year, so a parent has an understanding of what they can and can't afford. But more importantly, it allows the student to realize that my GPA does matter, that the GPA is going to truly have an impact on my performance. If I can increase my academic or institutional money an additional $5,000 to $10,000 to $15,000 at any given point, whether it's a Division II McKendree or an NAIA Central Methodist, then I as an athlete know that what my performance in the classroom is going to do is truly impact the decision if I can afford to attend those schools. So let's kind of circle that back up till we move on to the next thing. It's important that we understand that each student and their student, not just their student, their parent, guides themselves to the FAFSA.org website, that you complete a FAFSA as early as your freshman or sophomore year. There's nothing wrong with doing that early estimator. It's not submitting anything officially. It's a high-level way for you to have an understanding of what that EFC number is. EFC standing for Estimated Family Contribution. And knowing that is that number closer to zero, and that's where you want it for getting federal assistance. But also the closer to zero, the more likely you are to get both unsubsidized and subsidized loans, work study, the more likely you are to get additional assistance through institutional scholarships or the net price calculator. That FAFSA and EFC number drives a lot of decisions from a recruiting or admissions office, as well as the recruiter that's on that athletic coaching staff. And so I think that plays a big role in our decisions. But it doesn't just play a decision. It's not just a decision for answering individual. Sorry about that. My battery's going dead. Plug it in. So it doesn't just impact us financially as we graduate, but it also impacts us psychologically as we're training and preparing for these major national events. You wrestlers out there probably have your mom or dad telling you, well, you're not going to get a scholarship now, you lost that event. Well, I mean, that's just a little crazy. I mean, it's great that a parent is tunnel focused on making sure their son or daughter has a scholarship, but I will say from a coaching perspective, at both the high school and collegiate levels, that's not really, that's so far from the truth, it's not even funny. So if you are a parent or you are a coach and you're tunnel focused on improving academic performance, setting up study tables and helping your athletes achieve those goals, that's just half of the equation. The other half of that equation is having the students talk to their parents, having the parents complete net price calculators and FAFSA information. My suggestion and what I would tell any of my athletes at the high school level is that I would start doing that stuff as early as your freshman. I keep repeating it, as early as your freshman and sophomore year. I think that plays a big role in the deciding factors of what we are going to do in the sport of wrestling, and then where are we going to look for our institutions. That being said, so I've given you a little bit high level about where the money is, net price calculator, FAFSA. That's all the non-athletic performance scholarships that are out there for you, and there's a ton of money out there that can be awarded to you based on your academic character, community service, all of those non-athletic related events that you participate in school. Hey Brandy, how you doing? Seeing a lot of good faces popping in here. A lot of great college and high school coaches. So hopefully that allowed you guys a little bit better understanding of the FAFSA, the institutional scholarship model, and then the last piece there is really asking questions about what does the micro scholarships look like within the admissions office. Those are normally ran and determined by the dean of admissions, and they're the person that really is kind of the gatekeeper to all of those micro micro scholarships. Normally that becomes more of a one-to-one personal communication with you and the admissions officer that you're working with, and then that admissions officer would normally work with the dean of admissions to identify those individual financial supports. Moving past that financial part of the scholarship model, and we're about almost 30 minutes into this, and I'll come back to this because I'm going to package up how all of this financial stuff works into one scholarship. We at Lindenwood back in the day, or at Menlo, we would call it an award letter. Shout out to Menlo College and the women's team and the men's team, Joey Martinez, because they're my boys. So I appreciate all the stuff they did for me while I was out there. The next step of this is, yes, we as coaches or parents are staying focused on this academic performance, which obviously drives that institutional scholarship matrix. But we also have to then start creating brand awareness. And what do I mean by brand awareness? I'll use, Nick Aguilar was a good name. He's the current 25-pounder at Rutgers. His dad's like a brother to me. I use him as an example. Him or a Jace Luchow, because we really we really worked on focusing on how to develop a good, well-rounded resume, having a personal statement with that resume, and then creating a portfolio. So my times as the Olympic director of the California Future Olympic Program, what I had found in having this huge pool of highly talented student athletes was we would get them to national events, and when we would get them there, yes, they were wrestling, and yes, I could go talk to a number of Division I coaches who are amazing individuals, and they couldn't directly have communication sometimes depending on what your grade level was. So in 2012 and 2013, that kind of was the transformational post for me as a coach. We began that Future Olympian model in California. And I would have to say, by placing these students, working with past Greco-Roman students like a Ryan Mango and those Spencer and all those guys that really came before in my Missouri days, I begin to notice that the student athletes, were losing focus on how to get scholarship money. So what we decided to do was start putting together both the cover page, a resume, and a personal statement about why I want to wrestle or go to college. This is kind of the important piece to the equation. It's much like getting a job or being active in job seeking for talent acquisition in a sense. It's no different than getting a job. We're still leveraging and trying to earn $30,000 to $50,000 a year. We're not getting paid cash, but we're getting paid swap. We're getting paid in scholarship opportunities to attend institution of themselves. And we just took, I believe myself, I'm one of them, in my early 2000 years. I took back and just kind of, I guess, maybe our egos take the best of us as coaches. And I wasn't really focused on what it was going to take to get these student athletes to that next level. And how do we begin branding ourselves as a coach? How can I build a relationship with all of these other Division I, NEI, Division II, and Division III coaches, but more importantly, work with the Luke Bennett's and the Bennett's and the Moffats of Central and the Clackamas crew? And how do we start to begin those reputations or relationships that really will help us start branding our student athletes? So it started with us creating some form of resume. I will post a couple resumes after I get approval from those families to make a post and just allow you guys to kind of see what I envision and what I have done for the last 10 years from an academic/athletic resume, which allows you to then in one piece of paper outline your athletic performance and all the big benchmarks. Don't just label the ones that you won, but label the ones that maybe you didn't All-American, but you beat good head-to-heads. Label your academic successes and failures, right? But this would give, this then began to become kind of the roadmap for how we begin to start placing nearly 100%. My brother and I placed nearly 100% of all of our athletes at the university level. Now, not every kid's qualified for the Division I level. I'll be honest with you. Not every kid, they might be qualified and have the performance, but maybe not have the resources to pay for those opportunities. Well, we as coaches have to have the candid discussion with both those families, and I know moms and dads, it's hard to have that discussion with, and I know they want the best thing for their son or daughter, but at the end of the day, it's important that we as coaches help student athletes become better stewards of their own success, I guess you could say, and really begin working on how do we create a well-rounded one-page document that you can put into the hands of a coach. You know, I can't tell you how many coaches appreciate me coming to high senior nationals and every one of my kids having a resume, and instead of having to sit in the line around all of those tables, the kids can pull them out of their bag in a little folder and say, hey coach, I'm interested in attending your school, here's my accolades, look forward to having your discussion. And obviously in the resume you have your track, you have all of the Flow Wrestling accounts, you have your information. So I think from a brand awareness perspective, my coach always said put money in the bank. And I think putting money in the bank, in many cases, as I travel the United States, putting money in the bank means going to practice, putting in the grind, putting in your hard leg work, road work, getting into the weight room. But that's not the entire bank. So if we're going to make a deposit on our future, it's also how are we going to make brand awareness of our athletes? How am I, as an athlete, going to put myself out there for even not just praise, but also criticism? They then can see that you've maybe underachieved at certain events. That changes the discussion between a college coach and the student athlete themselves, because that college coach can now have open discussion and open dialogue about what they're doing in their own personal training. I as the Olympic director in California, for 4 years, I had a blessed time just observing coaches over in California. As the head coach in Nevada, I got at Greco for a year. I got to really experience some amazing coaches, the Jake Rollins, the Pete Martins, of Pistol Pete's, Fred Meyer. I was able to work with some amazing programs. And when I sit there and look, and I would shout out to Selma High School. They're some of my best friends and some of the most loyal people I've ever met. But it was interesting as I started working with Joey and Sam and Rob, how distant I say we, 'cause I act like I'm part of their team, as they were from how do we really start placing some of the best wrestlers in America at those collegiate levels? How do we get Gracie into traveling to the OTC as a freshman, as a female? How does I can go through the list of number of kids, the Luans of the world, or all the kids at Selma. How do we start creating brand awareness for those individuals as Pena, as early as their freshman and sophomore year? And as we began to do that, and as we began to grow and brand what maybe Selma looked like, Sam, their head coaches, and Joey, they're some of the classiest coaches that I've ever worked with. But how do I, as an outsider, help deliver what I thought might be a good solution to my programs, and then how do they adopt that? And I will say, part of the equation is performing and putting money in the bank in the practice room. But if we want 100% of our students to move on, if that's what our real goal is, to move 100% of our students onto the collegiate level, then it's more important, probably even more important, that we even focus on their student academics, their character that's going on and off the mat. And more importantly, how does that drive dollar signs and put true money in the bank? Not to put sweat, time, talent, and treasure, but how is that turning into scholarships 2 and 3 years down the road? So I think that's one of the biggest things that my brother and I at United States Wrestling Academy has really done a good job of. It's also working with other coaches, the Vic Bomacitas down at South Dade, and J.D. Robbins up in Orlando, and so many other programs that you get to kind of see. So as a coach, I would say, as I wrap up this, I'm going to tie back into this financial perspective. As a coach, I would say start looking at other coaches. Start looking at what are the other programs doing that are getting their kids to the Division I. And no disrespect to the Division I, just to any university. I think it's important for us as individuals to make sure that every university has a unique thing about it. I will say, as I talk to college coaches and high school coaches across America, I think it's important that a family visits 3 to 5 schools. If your goal, because you had one coach and your son or daughter signs with the first school that comes and talks to them and presents to them, then they're probably going to end up in some trouble. So let me kind of transition off to some data for you guys. In America, there's nearly 16 million high school students, and of those 16 million students, nearly 4 million of them graduate, 4.3 million graduate a year. That's kind of an alarming, that's a big number. But not only are they, what's up, Greg? Not only are they, thank you, not only are those students graduating, but of the 4.1 or 2 million students that are graduating, only 49% of them will actually go on to a 4-year institution. And of the 49% that go to a 4-year institution or go to college post high school, of those 49% of those students that go on, only about 45% of them will actually graduate from the institution they started at in the first 5 years. You say, well, that's alarming. Only 25% of high school graduates are graduating a year within 5 years? Absolutely. So you might think to yourself, well, where are those students going? For all of you athletes that are sitting here listening, I see a lot of coaches down in Vegas and Missouri and California. I see a lot of you individuals sitting here watching this. It's important for us to also understand that how a student begins their research, begins creating awareness of universities, that they don't limit themselves. Don't limit yourself to one region or one demographic or one career pathway. Each institution, for you athletes that are on here, every one of your school districts in Missouri or California or Nevada have career pathways. They may not publicly say it, but they know what you're talking about. And most of you student athletes know what they know that they know what they're talking about. They're talking about industry-specific careers. So we're not saying I'm going to be a doctor, but we're saying I'm going to maybe work in the health service market. Well, if I know that I'm going to be in that health service pathway, then I then can start looking at institutions that have those majors. When I was at Menlo, the thing that created the biggest trouble to me from recruiting from Lindenwood University, which was an AI with nearly 125 majors, to Menlo College was Menlo's a business college. They have business and they have psychology. And because of that, I was limited to the talent that I could really recruit. So you really had to be a little bit more tunnel focused or strategic as to the students that you were recruiting. I will say this, Keith Spataro, the Vice President of Enrollment at Menlo, had a great statement for me in 2012. He said, you got to learn when to cut bait, Bill. You got to learn when to cut bait. And for you student athletes and parents that are sitting on here today, note to yourself, if a college coach breaks communication with you, that's not a bad thing sometimes. They're learning that they have to then start embracing what does this mean to recruit a well-rounded student athlete to my institution. And sometimes it's not just about your athletic performance, but it's also about your academic performance. If you're going to go to a school like a Menlo and want to be a doctor, but they have no major, my main focus would be, if they came there, I would spend half of my time with that student trying to talk them into changing their major, their passion path, their belief, or what they see in themselves in their future. This is a 4 to 5 year term, right? You student athletes are going to have 4 to 5 years to really encompass what the rest of your life is going to look like. So on top of the statistics, I will note there's nearly 6,900 colleges across America. Some 2, some 4-year institutions. If you can only name 4 to 50 universities, you're limiting yourself. Make sure that you find out what you want to do. Do some career interest surveys. I'll drop this link into the message or the PowerPoint that I post later today. But the ONET has, the Department of Labor issues out a career interest survey. That career interest survey is pretty strong. The parameters that I've seen over the last 20 years are pretty close and pretty accurate to the passion path of the student. So students, figure out what you want to do before you choose to go to the college. The average debt for a student across America is roughly $38,000. So you, the students, although you get $50,000 to go to an out-of-state Division I school, you might only get $25,000 in academic and athletic scholarship. You're still stuck with $25,000 a year. Well, if you tack that up for $100,000 to $125,000 a year, you're going to have an $800 a month payment post-graduation. That is going to ultimately affect you having children, getting married, having a house, driving a nice car. These decisions that you're making at the high school level are determining the outcome of the rest of your life. So now that I've said that, let's bring this back full circle. We're 40 minutes into this, and I'm going to try and close this up in the next 20 minutes. If I, a student, and I'm a freshman, and I'm entering my freshman year, it's going to be important to me. If I were to do my life all over again, it is going to be important to me that I go out and do an interest survey and have a thought process, a notebook. In your coaches should have you journalizing your successes, your failures. If you're not doing that as an athlete, or if you're not doing that as a student, you need to make sure that you step your game up. That is part of putting money in the bank. You should be taking notes on what your coach is teaching in practice. You should be talking and taking notes to people at the gym, and when it comes to strength and conditioning and nutrition. All of these moving pieces free up mental space in your mental performance and strength that ultimately affects your win record. So I would say take out your notebook. Start journalizing for as early as your freshman year. Take a career interest survey. Understand exactly what you want to do as an individual as you're going into your sophomore, junior, and senior year. If you're an individual, I always love this one. I love freshmen that says, I'm going to be an engineer but didn't take algebra their freshman year or their 8th grade year. If you have not taken algebra your 8th grade year, you're going to play catch up on math courses. You're going to limit your performances in the things that you can do in high school because you're going to be taking more core classes. Be strategic. Don't choose a career because your mom, dad, brother, sister, cousin told you to do a career. Take a career that's your passion, that's an interest to you. Decide that early stage. Once you have that deciding factor, then you can start looking for institutions. Once you find those institutions that you might want to attend based on the career pathway that you have chosen, then begin to start looking at the wrestling programs that align with those majors. In many cases, it's interesting as I travel across America as a coach. It's interesting when I speak. I mean, I ask these questions, and those of you that are on here, you get stuck having to talk to me a lot. The Pistol Pete guys, the Parkway South guys, the USWA guys across America. I'm still talking to my college athletes because I'm having the same discussion with those athletes that are at maybe a Fresno State that I was having with them in high school. So find out where exactly you want to go as an individual. Find out what you want to major in. Once you've targeted that, then begin creating your resume. Begin building that resume as early as your freshman year. It's a whole lot easier to update that. It's a whole lot easier to complete that resume and bring it to USA Nationals and bring it to Virginia Beach Nationals and have it with you when you go to Fila Cadets or Fila Juniors or the US Open or Fargo. All of those off-season events, we go out and wrestle these things till we're blue in the face. And in many cases, you coaches, if you're sitting in the stands, if you're sitting in the corner coaching and you're not walking up and shaking the hands of the collegiate coaches within those rooms, shame on you. Because it may not, to you internally, it doesn't really benefit you, but it will benefit the legacy of your athletic program. So I will say that. Make sure that you guys not only figure out the institution, begin that resume early on. Once you begin that resume, begin taking notes and journalizing all of those things that you are talking about, all of those things that you are participating in, and really take note of the things that you fail at and the things that you win at. And when you win at something, figure out why you won at it. Maybe it was the mental state that you were in. Maybe it was the way you cut weight for the week prior to the event. Maybe it was for 3 months prior to the season starting, I was doing road work and I was lifting. If we wait till day one of the wrestling season and we begin road work and lifting then, you've missed the pocket. You've missed the year of the season. And then lastly, let's close this thing. We're about 18 minutes out. Let's close this thing with the money. Okay, let's break this thing down. If I'm a 0 EFC, I've completed my FAFSA and I'm a 0 EFC, right? That's the estimated family contribution. That is going to qualify me. I'm gonna rattle these off the top of my head. That is going to qualify me for $6,195. So I'm getting nearly $6,000 because of my income. Myself, I was homeless. My twin and I were homeless our junior and senior year in high school. I had a 0 EFC. Meant I could not afford to go to school. So the federal government gave me, back then it was $5,700 or $5,900, which is crazy that 25 years later it's only a couple hundred more. But so you guys would qualify for that $6,100. You then focus on the next thing. As I navigate through this, it's not just the institutional, but it's going to be, excuse me, it's going to be the additional things like work study. So if I get a work study at a university, that's $1,800. If I look at my subsidized and my unsubsidized loan, now this is going to be a loan. As a parents, kids on that, athletes on this video, you can mute this. You don't have to listen. But I recommend if a student's got to pay more than $5,500, if the parent has the full dollar amount, make the student take the student loan. Make a deal with them. Parents, if you've got the money for it, tell them you'll pay the loan off at the end of each year. That way you hold them accountable for their own actions. Okay? Athletes, I'm sorry that I had to say that, but we are looking at statistics. Statistically speaking, only 25% of you are going to graduate college. That is not your parents' fault. It's the athlete's fault. The part that is the variable here for parents is the parents themselves are driving the discussion and the student to a situation that might cost them money. If it meant I go to this, I see Juliet on here. She's a teacher at St. Louis Community College. If I have a student that qualifies for a junior college, well, St. Louis, they don't have Merrimack anymore. But if there was a community college here in St. Louis, I would recommend my son or daughter go to that community college. If I'm a 0 EFC, they're going to get paid to go to that institution. Better yet, if I just let me give you some parameters there. If I'm a JUCO kid and I go to Iowa Central, I'm going to have out-of-state dormitories, but I'm going to have in-state tuition. Because their dormitory has some scholarship assistance, if you qualify for the $6,100 in federal Pell money and you get a scholarship, it would be free for you to go to a two-year college with dorms. It only makes sense from a financial perspective. Now, it might not be the importance, thanks, Randy, it might not be so important that we go to a four-year school. And for some of you parents and coaches, that's the thing that you praise yourself on. Myself, I had a couple individuals that I helped through college. It is important to me that they graduate college. It didn't matter what I was doing as an individual, whether I helped them or didn't help them. It was important to me that those two individuals had the ability to have the life skills to move past that. So, in that scholarship dollar amount, your EFC number could help drive both the junior college model and the four-year model. The EFC will drive work study. It will drive the Perkins, which is 55 or 59, 50, roughly 55. Let's just ballpark it average. So in those just three buckets, we're not even talking about institutional. If I use the institutional, Webster doesn't have they don't have a wrestling program. They don't have, but I'm going to use theirs because I have that number's in the top of my head. If I have a 2.5 GPA and I have a 19 ACT, that's going to qualify me for $10,000. Well, if I was a 0 EFC who got a low grade in ACT, much like me because I was working night jobs and day jobs because I was homeless, that's 10. I got the $6,000 from the EFC. That brings me to $16,000. I get the nearly $2,000. We're going to ballpark these for work study. That brings me to $18,000. I take the subsidized loan and unsubsidized loan. That's going to put me right around $23,500. And that's if I have a low GPA in ACT. In many cases, and I can't say this enough, Brandy's out there,
She's a great coach, does great things. There's a lot of great programs out there that the name may not be recognizable all the time. You may not know where Jamestown is, and you're a female, and you might want to wrestle there. You might not know where Menlo College is. There's a lot of institutions out in America of these 6,900 universities or colleges and universities across the country that have wrestling. If we can identify what the passion path is, we can outline target goals. We can then create a resume. We then begin to brand our student athlete. But more importantly, we allow us as coaches and the students to start creating their own awareness for them as an individual through track or for flow or through YouTube. And they can start then beginning huddle, communicating with those four-year institutions. I will say this, in speaking to any number of athletes all the way across America, it is important that you begin creating awareness of yourself. Put yourself in front of those coaches. Kevin Jackson was one of the first guys that really came into my wrestling camps with Chris Whalen and Joe McFarland out at Michigan. Chris Whalen and I did an exceptional job, and I didn't know then what Chris was doing for me when doing Nation's Best Wrestling camps. But by creating this, by removing the wall between what I thought myself was as a coach and what the Division I coaches were. You look at them as your idols. You look at them as the heroes, whether male or female. I see Brandy's name in there. She was a magnificent female wrestler early stage in this game. Having her or Marcy or any one of these individuals actually to be able to speak to them as a young female and being able to get real questions answered, and what were the experiences they lived in that women's movement in the 80s and the 90s, right? What are those things? And those are the moments that are actually going to allow you as a student athlete to begin becoming maybe on the board for the coach. Maybe it becomes that you just become that familiar face at a local event or at a national event. Those types of things are what's going to help create not only brand awareness for the student, but also for the program. So for you coaches out there, not only are we putting information into your hands about how do we start identifying this money early stage, how do we actually start beginning looking at career pathways for these students. If you're a coach and your first question is what Division I team you want to wrestle for, then you're not doing your job. Because at the end of the day, the statistics are telling us we are not doing our job. I used to be the same guy. I think it's important that we as coaches understand that what the kid wants to do with their own personal and passionate life. But then we turn the page, transition that to the next phase of creating those goals, acting on those goals, then journalizing those goals into a career resume and a personal statement that college coaches can read in real time while they're sitting in the stands watching you compete. It doesn't matter if you're a sophomore. Take your resume, give it to your coach, have your coach go give it to the college coach. The college coach, you get the Division I NCAA coach, they'll be a little standoffish because you're a sophomore. Great. Give it to your coach. Allow that coach some reading material while they're sitting in the stands. It might give them a reason why to follow you. Moving past the resume and all of that information, now that we've got documentation, now it's about action. So I would highly encourage any student athlete. I would highly encourage coaches. Again, I've been fortunate to have some amazing coaches. Chris Whalen, I give a lot of credit to. He and I butt heads a lot and have over the 20 years. But he was one of the individuals that really started having me do these things early stage of how do you send an email and how do we create this communication? How do you create dialogue for these coaches? So coaches, understand the rules and regulations per grade level. Make sure that your athletes understand those rules and regulations. It's important for you, the coach. Forget about the kid for a second. It's important for you, your legacy, and the future of your program that you understand that. Take the ownership for yourself. And lastly on that note, coaches, make sure that you give them a guiding light. Allow them to come to you with open-minded questions in the route that, hey, maybe they do want to go to a junior college. Maybe they don't want to move away from home. Maybe it's your job as the coach to push back on them and say, I think you need to move away from home. Maybe there's things at home that aren't convenient or aren't good for your future as an athlete. Listen to the coach. Have an open dialogue. And then lastly on that coaches piece, coaches, begin to start creating an awareness and working with other college coaches. And more importantly, begin to network. Network. I can't tell you the amount of great conversations Vic Bombacita and I might have at a national event, or the JDs, or the Joey and Sam at Selma, or Greg Varela, what a rock star, in Gilroy, past Gilroy coach and now Los Gatos High School coach. The idea that I can call Don Martinez in Sacramento, I can do this all the way across the country, right? And so I think it's important for us to really take a look at who we are as a coach, but also the program, and you college coaches, you high school wrestlers, begin to start creating an awareness of each other and allow yourself to understand what the financial status is for your roadmap. High school athletes, you are going to take on debt. Very rarely is there a full ride at any institution in America. If you've got a 4-point plus GPA, a 36, 33, 34, 35, 36 ACT, if you are multiple time national champ, yeah, they're going to bank on you. They're going to roll the dice and they're going to bring you into a full ride. But in many cases, for those of you across this landscape of America, a full ride does not mean a full athletic ride. In many cases, even the smartest athletes, the best national champions, aren't getting that full ride solely on their athletic performance. They're getting the full ride because they had highly successful athletic career, but they also did their end on the academic performance. And lastly on that, for those of you individuals out there that are coaches and teachers, counselors, I would highly recommend you finding and really earmarking the ACT, SAT prep person in your region. We have one here in the local St. Louis region that I use and my brother uses that is amazing. Guarantees points. It's all benchmarked. They're out there. Don't just pick up a phone and call any old person and have them teach your son or daughter how to take a test. Find somebody that's got proven results, because that ACT definitely drives, I'm not kidding you, it drives the institutional scholarship money. That ultimately is going to help you have a more affordable career. I will lastly say, the last statement I'll really say in this moment, we got about 6 minutes left, and I'll close this with some comments. Thank you for all the people are dropping in information. So that's kind of been driving my discussion here today. I think it's important for you guys to understand that at the end of the day, you athletes make your own destiny. It is not your mom and dad's fault. It is not your coach's fault. The amount of kids for you athletes on here that I see talk back to their parents at events, that discredit their coach in front of people by yelling, screaming, throwing a temper tantrum, all that does is weaken the ability for you to ever get a scholarship. As a college recruiter, 2 things I looked at. How well could a kid bounce on the side of the mat because it really meant they were an athlete? And number 2, what was their performance at the beginning and end of a match? So I will say this, your behavior that you represent in front of the community to your parents and your coaches normally is a reflection of how you treat your teachers and everybody else in your world. That is a reflection that you cannot allow out in the public eye. So I will say this, make sure that you as a student athlete truly take ownership in your own performance, because myself, my colleagues, the individuals that are working towards helping you get into these schools, it will damage you. The first time a collegiate coach might only sit in your gymnasium, in your practice room one time. You're going to get one shot at this. That is your interview. You may not speak to them, but how you treat your parents, how you treat the officials and how you treat your coaches tells the entire story of who you are as an individual. And lastly, that was my comment for the high school kids. For the college and high school, or for the high school coaches that are on here, thank you for sharing this. Lewis Baker, this Facebook page has been interesting during my lunchtime. I get to watch new training. I know I was asked originally to bring some of the high energy training in the practice room that follows me from camp to camp across America. But I felt like, from my perspective as a president and CEO of 2 college placement and talent acquisition businesses, I think it's important for you guys to understand that you yourself also need to make sure that you get out and brand and create awareness for yourself, because then and only then will the students in your future, the people behind you, have an opportunity to be able to find opportunities at both local universities, both national universities, 2-4, NCAA and NAIA. So you college or you high school coaches that had sat through this, I see 30, 40 people have been on in and out of this, and I hope that this thing gets shared. It is important to me in my last 3 minutes here for you to understand, everybody that's listening to hear, every single stakeholder that's in this video that is listening, parents, kids, coaches, every one of you are important to the destiny of your athletes as you move forward. Students, make sure that you keep your grades up, because at the end of the day, you're leaving dollar signs on the table. You now can go look at how you find institutional scholarship money. It's the net price calculator on college websites. With that being said, my name is Bill Mitchell. I'm the president, co-founder of Chiron Consulting and Scholar Path. If there's anything that we can do for you, you can message me in Facebook. I don't want to flood my emails or my cell phone text messages, but I would say I'm here and I'm around. Most of the people that are on this today have seen me at a camp at some point throughout America, and most of you have my cell phone, so you can feel free to give me a call. I appreciate your time and look forward to seeing what Lewis Baker has moving forward. Thank you and have a good day. Okay. Then how do we close this out?